So, okay, guys, so I'm going to go through this strategy today. At the end of the day, like if you're doing marketing, you want to be able to close as many deals as you can. The more deals you can close, the more deals you can monetize, the more marketing we can spend, right? So today I'm hoping I'm going to give you guys another little quiver in your bow or another tool in your tool belt that you guys can go try. The big thing I'm going to show you guys today is like how to do this, but I'm always happy to partner with people to like walk you through and do the first one. And really more what that looks like usually is I'm going to run point and I'm going to run it through our system, but I can involve you and show you the whole process. And if after the second one, you're like, all right, Casey, thanks, man, I'm ready to go. Cool, right? That's awesome. Or maybe we do the next one, a certain sort of hybrid, but I wanted to tee that up. So as you guys watch this today, you guys you're not like overwhelmed, like, oh man, this looks cool, but how the heck am I going to implement this? So the revive method. All right. Again, one big disclaimer on this. You guys should understand your state, understand laws, talk to an attorney. I've run all this through our attorney to make sure that we're covered and we're not and we're disclosing what we need to do. And again, it's very state by state. So I encourage you guys, don't just go like rip one of our contracts and go with this. I mean, you probably be fine, but again, I would definitely do some due diligence. Okay. All right. So why you guys need this, why it's important. I've been teasing it quite a bit, but if you guys, anybody's done fix and flips, it could be very risky. I think it's one of the most risky things in real estate is to go fix and flip because you got market factors, right? You might be having to borrow money from private money lenders. The fluctuation in the market, right? Especially right now, kind of a rough market right now where there's not a whole lot of buyers, right? If you're fixing and flipping, it's a very scary time to be fixing and flipping, right? So this is why I went with this strategy because the way I underwrite these deals and the way I structure them, we can actually take a lot of the risk out of the equation and the seller shares that risk with us. And the other thing is fixing and flipping, right? Contractors going over budget. So guys, it's going to happen. If it hasn't happened, it will happen, right? But again, we're structuring deals this way to where we can mitigate a lot of that risk, okay? Because again, ask yourself this question. What if you could go be a fix and flipper, but not have to take all the risk? I'm going to give you guys that answer. So here it is, the revive method. So if you guys have heard of Novation, it's very similar to a Novation, all right? And I'm going to kind of go over the key differences on a slide a little bit later. But what we're doing is this works for a free and clear property or one with a loan, right? If it has a loan, we're just going to take over their payments. It's similar. It's like a sub two, or some people might call this like a sub two flip, right? But what we're doing, the difference between this and like a subtail or whatever, just taking over somebody's sub two and going in and flipping it is it works really good if they've got some equity, right? Because you're going to take it over sub two and then you're going to go fix up the property. And then on the back end, we're going to go in and we're going to pay the seller a profit share. It's going to be predetermined, right? But this is how we get the seller on board it's all based on this profit share. And we could pay them more, right? Because we're going to be able to sell this hot property for top dollar. Think about this. Instead of buying it outright, you're taking over the existing mortgage and you're paying them on the back end, right? So you don't have to here's the other thing. You don't have to go finance that full purchase price. You don't have to go find a hard money lender and pay 12, 13, 14, maybe 20% if this is your first deal. You don't have to finance that part. All you got to do is finance the rehab. And remember, seller gets paid on the back end. And again, we're going to mitigate a bunch of this risk with the way we structure the profit share. The other big part about this, and maybe why you should like it the most or why I like it, is we're solving problems and we're actually legitimately creating win-wins. In this strategy, we're actually partnering with them to get them more money, right? I always position this when I'm negotiating or pitching this revive method. It's like, hey, I could pay more than the typical wholesaler or the typical fix and flipper because we're sharing in the risk. So again, the sellers win, they get more money. They don't have to get lowballed on a cash offer. Investors win, right? Because we don't have to put in as much capital, and you guys are going to see we reduce a lot of risk. The other way, a cool thing to win is your private money lender. Like let's say that the purchase price is going to be covered by the loan, right? Or it's going to be paid on the back end, right? But you're going to have to fund the rehab. What you guys will see is the way I structure this is the private money lender is very well protected because they're going to be in second position. They're going to get paid right after the loan, and they're actually really well protected. So it's a great way for a private money lender to come in, make 10, 12, 15%, whatever you negotiate, and they're well secured, right? Versus them going and lending on a deal where there's already 70% leverage through a bank, and then they're going up to 85, 90%, right? That can be a very risky thing. And some lenders might do it, but again, I always want to protect my lenders. So I want to show you guys how to structure this right. So again, 3 different people are winning. You know what? I didn't mention the fourth one. The fourth one is the real estate agent, whether that's you or your wife or friend or just another third-party partner, right? Guys, I get a ton of agents to bring me these deals, and I get a ton of agents that'll go walk properties for me now and be my boots on the ground because they get to go list the property on the back end, right? And this creates more listings for them. And now we're listing the property for top dollar. So guess what? they're getting a higher commission. So a ton of value for many different parties. So kind of the sequence of events, right? I kind of went over this a little bit, but to show you kind of in like a 1 through 5 steps. Again, first step, you take over the seller's loan, right? We talked about that. The big thing next is we're going to transfer the deed, right? And when I get to the part about novations, this is the key difference on a novation agreement. And if you guys know what a novation is, you're probably asking yourself, well, Casey, this is a novation. Well, it's different because on a novation, you're relying upon that contract to ultimately flip that house, right? If you've ever done a novation, and a lot of people have probably been through this, is if you get a seller that flakes on you, or let's say something happened to them, right? It could get really messy because you're relying upon a contract versus in this scenario, you are on the deed, right? You are controlling the property. And if you're going to go put 50K, 100K, or maybe even just 20K into this property, you want to make sure you're on the deed. So that's a very, very important thing you guys got to pay attention. All right. Now, next step is we've closed, we've changed the deed. Now we go complete the renovations. All right. Hopefully it's a quick, easy one. But guys, I've done some that were 6 months and we did a $150,000 renovation. Right. But either any one of those can work. Okay. Then once you get done, we're selling the property at market value. And then the back end, we split profits with the seller. All right, so the revive method versus novation. I've pretty much covered all this already, guys, but the key difference is who holds the deed, right? Again, in the revive method, if I'm the buyer, I'm going to be on the deed, not the seller, okay? I'm also going to be the one funding repairs, which is similar to a novation, right? And again, we're going to pay the seller on the back end just like a novation. But here's the risk part, right? I think this is much lower risk because I control the deed versus if I do a novation and I go start putting money into that property to sell it, again, that could be very, very favorable terms, but if something happens and that guy ghosts you or he disappears or whatever could happen, and we all know the people that are in these situations often are not the most reliable people, right? I don't want to depend upon that person. All right, but how about, you guys are probably asking, well, what type of deals does this work for, right? It does not work for every situation. And again, I bet some of you guys are asking yourself that already, like, well, this sounds great, Casey, but if they don't have any equity, why are we doing this, right? So the first thing is they got to have equity. I'm going to share a quick equation here in just a second with you guys to show you like about how much equity is needed. But my rule of thumb is at least 30% equity, right? But we could work off of the back end sale number for that equity piece, okay? But they got to have equity. This is not a good low equity strategy, okay? And if you're pulling your list, now you know what list to go do. I would go pull a list of the at least 50% or greater equity, and that's exactly who I would market to get this, okay? The other part is value add. Right? It's got to have some value add potential where you go in and fix it up. If not, you're not going to bring a whole lot of value to this equation or this negotiation or this offer if the house doesn't need any repairs, right? And there's no upside. But when they have that, which guys, I'm telling you, there's so many properties out there in different markets across the country where houses worn down or hasn't been renovated and all the other houses have gone way up in value, right? But this one hasn't, but the people don't have the money to do the renovations. Right? I'm sure there's a lot of you guys out there have seen this situation where house needs a bunch of work. The seller wants to get more money out, but they don't have any money to do it, right? Or they don't want to manage contractors. All these are things that you could position for yourself as the hero to come help these people out. The last thing is timeline, right? This will not work if they're about to be, well, I always say it won't work if they're going to be about to be foreclosed on, but honestly, it can work because you can get them out of foreclosure and you can catch up the arrears and still structure it and do it, right? But it's not good for somebody who's got to go, they got to sell this house in 30 days because they've already got their next house identified or they're moving or whatever it is. Like you got to have at least, I say minimum 60 days, but preferably at least 90 days of time. But you guys will be surprised. Most people have some time. And if you outline it for them and the fact that they're going to get more money if they just wait 60 to 90 days, you'd be surprised how many people are like, yeah, I want the money, right? Why would they not? Why would they not want to get more, realize the full potential of their house? So if you hit these three things, again, equity, high equity, value add, and the seller has a flexible timeline, you can make this work. So the numbers, all right? I mentioned like, how do we underwrite this thing? So I want to be at least 70% or greater. So all you're doing is you're adding in the loan balance that's currently in place, this works with people who have a first mortgage, a second mortgage, and then they have a deferment. Add all that together, right? Then you're going to add in your rehab and then divide that by the ARV, okay? So it's typical math that you guys are probably used to, but just add in the total debt, divide it by the ARV, and you want to be at least 70%. Again, I typically do our deals around 50 to 60%, but you want to have a minimum of a 30% cushion. Otherwise, it's probably not a good fit, okay? So greater than 70%, we should be in business. So again, guys, this works for, and this is a spreadsheet that I do every time. And I'll kind of talk you guys through, if you want, how I do the talk track and how I pitch this. All right. This is the really the gold nuggets that you guys are going to get in a second. But I want to show you how to fill this out first. All right. So this is a deal we did. This is an actual property we did. But you can see I've probably got 25 different tabs in here. And all I do each time is I just duplicate the tab and I go put in the numbers. Right. So the first one we got to know the known variables. So your loan amount is $129,000. Okay. So that's what I put in here. You're going to know this. Okay. The next one you got to figure out or estimate, and this might take you a little more time, is your rehab, right? But this is a variable you need to know. Okay. And I'll come back to this because we're going to build in some profit margin here. You should calculate your holding costs, right? Again, guys, I'm not getting super detailed and like looking at every tax or like I'm being conservative. I'm putting in numbers and I'm just rolling with it. I'm going quick, right? Because we just want to be able to get a quick offer. At least that's how we run our offers. Okay. I factor in commissions and closing costs. I'm using 5%. You could use 6, whatever you want to use there. Okay. Now, here is the big variable that you got to figure out. Okay. It's the sale price. We don't know this for sure. This is the biggest unknown. And I tell my seller, I'm like, I don't know what we're going to sell it for, but you will find that most sellers are like, yeah, I mean, I think this thing's worth 320. That's what my neighbor got. My neighbor got that. It might have been 18 months ago when the market was still hot, right? But that's how much they got. And they're going to justify, sometimes they will justify this price more than you have to, right? But I want to show them a range of like a low to a high scenario of how much they're going to make on it. Okay. So then this is a variable I could tweak, right? The profit share, right? Now, this is how we set up the profit for them and for me, right? Now, on this one, again, the rest of these sales guys are just going to be calculated automatically, all right? But the variable I'm going to play with is the profit share number and the rehab number, okay? So I think this is a good point for me to mention the rehab, right? I want you guys to be conservative. And this works really well in a market where it's hard to find contractors. And guys, this is something you want to disclose this, right? If I'm positioning this to a seller, I say, hey, maybe in my head, I know I could get this thing done for $50K, all right? But that's my cost, my in-house cost, right? But if a GC were to go bid that, he's going to bid it up, right? It's not going to be like, that's cost. Let's say cost is $50,000, right? But guys, I want you to work in a profit margin here, a good, healthy one here, because you are doing all the work, right? And when you position this to the seller, again, I mean, this is the only pushback you might get is they might balk at this if you're padding it by 40, 50,000. But guys, that's what I typically do. We try to pad it by 50,000. But I tell my seller, I'm like, guys, I'm being conservative because I don't want to have to come back to you and ask for more money. B, I'm the one that's managing this. And C, look at the final number, right? Like no one else is offering you this. I'm the one taking on this headache. I'm the one leveraging my crews to come in and do this work and get you the most money for your property. But guys, again, you want to, like, I recommend the way I do it is I'm going to pad my rehab, right? Maybe pad is not the right word, but I'm going to work in some profit margin in here because guys, when this thing sells, this is how it gets paid out. And this is laid out very clearly in the promissory note and or the purchase contract. So when this house gets sold, the loan amount obviously is first position. Second comes the rehab, right? So that's going to get paid first. So if you look at this deal, right, we're at a total of whatever, that's roughly what, 230,000, 225,000, right? But if we're selling it for sales price of 260, right, there's a big cushion in there, right? I talked to you guys throughout this presentation about the profit margin and de-risking it, right? You want to take less risk on flips. So the way you take less risk is your total money into the deal is the loan amount plus the rehab. And it's actually your cost of the rehab, right? But that house, it should sell for a lot more if you're buying something that has equity. The last thing is how you position this to the seller. So that's why I've highlighted this last row in green. So a seller, if you think about it, he's just thinking about how much money am I selling this house for? How much money is my agent or this CMA or this other investor who's lowballing me? Like they're thinking about the total number. So I like to show them that number. This is simply their profit share on the back end plus the loan amount. So that way they can compare apples to apples. So that's how I show them that, guys, hey, if this goes well, and I tell them there's no guarantees, but if it goes well and it sells at the price that we both think it will, you could make $431,000, right? There's no one offering you $431,000 right now, is there? You guys see how that like positioning it that way, that's what gets them bought in. They're like, yeah, you're right. I could make more money on this. This house is worth more. I just don't have the time or money to go take care of it. The quick summary is it's a safe way to flip houses. You can de-risk it for yourself and the investor, right? Your private money lenders love it because the first position loan plus the second is typically like 70% or less. So they've got a good margin. So they love it. And you're going to have to bring less money to the table.
Thanks for listening to the DealMachine Real Estate Investing Podcast. Please leave us a review and follow along wherever you're listening to your podcast.